Good afternoon, and welcome to this Signicat webinar we are organizing together with experts from Janne and Visa. Today we discuss digital identity and payments wallets. What are identity and payment? Why are identity and payments merging into wallets? And how will wallets compete with existing solutions? This topic is much discussed and debated amongst identity and payment professionals. Google search for mobile wallet brings 690 million responses. European Union is preparing new digital identity legislation and introducing digital identity wallets to all EU citizens. Many companies are planning, developing and launching new wallet propositions for consumers. All are signs of change coming in how we use our digital identity, how we onboard and authenticate the services, and how we approve payments. Our aim is to bring you clarity and insight into this fast developing wallet space. You will hopefully get some answers on how wallets affect your own business. Even better if you learn how to benefit from the change. For this, we have two great visiting experts joining us today. So let's dive into introductions. Would you, Marie, please start by introducing yourself? Who are you? What do you and your company do in the identity and wallets space? Is there a specific angle you would like to bring into the discussion? Marie, please.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Janne. And thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussions. So my name is Marie Austenaa. I'm very happy to be heading up digital identity for Visa here in Europe. So Visa works very actively with wallet providers, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, as well as domestic wallets such as Vipps in the Nordics, typical payment wallets. We're also deploying the industry standard EMVCo payment wallet called Click to Pay, to make it easier to store cards and pay without the need to download an app. So that's our activities within payment wallets, but we're also very active in the EIDAS large-scale pilots for the EU digital identity wallet in order to understand how the future wallets can be used with payments. So, for accounts, for cards, use of the existing payment infrastructure to be able to authenticate payments, opening cards accounts and bank accounts, as well as maybe even holding payment credentials. So let's see what the future is bringing, but looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you and welcome, Marie. And next, Andrew, would it be okay if I call you Andy going forward?
Yes, absolutely, thanks.
Would you be kind to introduce yourself?
Sure, yes, so Andy Tobin. I've got a background in payments, mobile and identity. And I work for a company called Janne, and there's a bit of a story behind that. I was one of the first team members at Evenim. I think I was employee number 2 or 3, something like that. And Evenim created much of the technology that's used for digital credentials and self-sovereign identity. So you might have come across Hyperledger Indy, Hyperledger Aries, that kind of thing. Evenim was acquired by Avast, which is a Prague-based large cybersecurity company in 2021. And Avast also acquired a business called SecureKey, who provide the Canadian bank ID type system. And Avast then set up a new unit called the Digital Trust Services team to focus on giving people the tools to establish trust online. Then last year, Norton, which is even bigger than Avast as a cybersecurity company, bought Avast and created this new umbrella brand called Janne. If you look at jennedigital.com, you'll find us there. So that's what Janne is all about. It's the biggest cybersecurity company in the world, with now a very strong, a large team focused on this topic of digital trust. Also involved with both Janne and Marie on EIDAS. Here in Europe. With the Swedish government, I helped set up one of the large-scale pilot programs that successfully bid for and won funding to run a big EIDAS pilot, and that's the EWC Consortium, which stands for EUDI Wallet Consortium. So we're involved in that as well, and happy to be here to help share any information I can on the world of digital wallets and payments.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. So good to have you here. And my name is Janne Jutila. I'm from the Signicat International Sales Team, also leading the Payments and Wallets expert group within our company. So let's have a look at the agenda. Our agenda is very straightforward. We start by discussing why are identity and payments merging, what are the challenges of current solutions, and how do we define identity and payment wallets? I think this definition question often creeps up in the discussion. People have different views and opinions as to what counts as a sort of identity or payment wallet. So let's try to spend some time on that. Our second topic is about how wallets compete with existing solutions. And we try to tackle questions like what makes a wallet successful, how to achieve critical mass, and whether wallets will develop towards centralized or decentralized ecosystems. And that's what essentially Andy already brought up in his introduction. There is sort of strong underlying current of this sort of decentralization and control of personal information. And then to sort of wrap up, and then third topic is about what to expect from future. What are the different types of wallets likely to emerge? Who will be successful? And what is the role our companies will play in the wallet future? And the way we try to do this is like a virtual fireside chat, or even better, a sort of fireside debate. After the discussion, we will have good time for questions. So you can post questions during the discussion in the chat, and we will try to pick up as many as possible and then give our thoughts and opinions on those. So diving in, why are identity and payment merging into wallets? What do you think, Mari? Are they merging? You have a background in both identity and payment space. So what would be your take on it?
Yeah, good question if they are merging or not. We see a little bit of both. I think the first question I was kind of posing in mind as you were kind of summarizing this in, what really is a wallet? What counts as a wallet, and why should it merge with payments? And I'm sure that Andy will have more perspectives on that as well. But I look at it as a way of keeping third-party credentials, like your card, for instance, and then combining that with a form of acceptance, meaning that you can present your wallet for payment. Very focused on payment, right? So these wallets are very much today deployed as for consumers as a payment service to choose how they pay, and also to make sure that it's really secure and really conveniently. It's a really good way of combining biometric authentication, for instance, to secure the payment transaction. From a Visa perspective, we also, of course, we look at how we can make wallets and payments much more secure, especially card not present wallet payment transactions. And so tokens, in that sense, is really the key to make sure of this security, and they work really well with wallets. So I think that's been one of the reasons why we've been seeing a lot of growth in wallets, is basically innovation in payment capabilities as well. So I think some of the problems you said within identity and payment solutions, two things. For wallets, they are looking to solve the challenges we have in payment is really to combat fraud while maintaining a really convenient payment and checkout experience for merchants. So more or less embedding payment in new services. We talk about embedded finance, we talk about embedded payment as well, which means that the wallets present to the consumer a way of making that really convenient, making the payment convenient, as well as secure. But identity services, like we see, for instance, with VIPs and Swish as well, for that matter, are there to strengthen the payment capabilities of the wallet. They allow you to onboard to the wallet in a secure way that you can trust the wallet when you've onboarded using a digital identity. And then anytime you push a payment credential into the wallet as well, ideally, that is secured using an identity. So we see a lot of natural combined use cases and combined benefits between identity and payment wallets. Are they ever going to merge? I think that's going to be a topic that we can take maybe when look at the future outlook. I have my questions, but we certainly see a lot of synergies between identity and payment wallets. So I think I'll leave it for there in case I'm sure Andy has more to add to this as well.
Yeah, let's pass the baton to Andy and then maybe also expand. Mari brought up this sort of fraud and security issue.
Yeah.
But how do you see the combination of identity and payments regarding the security topics?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting one, and it's one that's being explored more and more. Firstly, I think as normal people, we're getting used to a new type of ceremony for paying for things, in store especially, which is you take your phone along and you tap it on the thing and something goes ping. Okay, and I think these user ceremonies are vitally important for the future of digital wallets. So people are more and more just using their phone as a wallet because they can pay with it. But this is not just about payments, it's about identity and other credentials and attributes for many, many more use cases as well. If we look just at payments though, and not when you're in a shop, but a remote payment, when you're maybe buying something online, there tends to be a number of components that make up that transaction. One would typically be your card details, another might be a delivery address, another might be an over 18 check, and so on. And I think there's a really big opportunity here, which is what I call identity-enriched payments. So in a single transaction, you can share multiple different components of information about yourself that you're sharing, under your control, that enable that whole payment transaction, the delivery information, like a verified delivery address, for example, an over 18, a country, a citizenship, whatever it might be, all to be done in a single transaction. I think that's going to be a huge breakthrough in streamlining the process for payments. And if you think identity-enriched payments, at the moment you've got card present and card not present transactions. I think there's a new type which could come along, like a cardholder verified type of transaction, which one would hope would incur lower costs, be cheaper for retailers, because the fraud should be an awful lot lower. So loads of opportunities in payments. I think we'll get into it more in a little bit on this webinar. In terms of security challenges, there's loads. I think it's really crucial as we get into these higher value transactions to be able to bind a person to the wallet. So the person executing the transaction is the person that got the card credentials, the ID credentials, etc. at the start. So is it still the same person? Because we know you can put different fingerprints into phones and have different people opening them. And I can open my wife's phone because she's got Face ID, but I can go in with a code and with a PIN code as well. And you can always bypass biometric stuff like that with a PIN code. So being able to strongly bind the person that's doing the transaction to the wallet to the person who originally got credentials, I think is a really important one to focus on. And that's for the higher assurance transactions. It's not like 30 quid or something in a local corner shop. But another one, I've got a list of loads here, but I'll just give one more, which is really a tricky one, which is about backup and recovery. So backing up your wallet and being able to recover it again if you lose it, or if you change phone. Okay, so we change phones, I get a new phone, etc. And you don't want to have to go through the whole process of getting all of your ID credentials and payment credentials again. So you restore your wallet onto the new phone. The key thing is, how do you make sure it's the right person doing the restoration? Because if you can't make sure about that, it could be anyone. So, you could be restoring my wallet onto your phone and going off using it. Okay. So backup is easy. Recovery is really, really complex. And there needs to be a lot of thinking around how you go about recovering wallets and making sure it's the right person doing that recovery.
Wouldn't that take us directly into the discussion of centralized and decentralized solutions? Recovery capability.
Not necessarily. Well, it could do. I think nobody out there in the general populace is going to care if it's centralized or decentralized, right?
But whether it's recoverable or not, I think many people will care.
Well, they might care that they don't like this wallet. Can they go use another wallet that's nicer and easier to use? Or one wallet has some functionality, but they don't. But they haven't got that wallet. They want to go and get it and port their data into that wallet. So I think that is a consideration for sure. And we'll see as the wallet wars heat up and different organizations and countries provide different wallets, how that's going to work.
I mean, with the decentralized approach, maybe it works for the centralized approach as well, but certainly where you have a multiple different types of information that's tied to your wallet, you still have an anchor, which is your identity credential, your true identity credentials. So being able to recreate that in a way that is, friendly enough, but still really secure, means that you can fetch, you can recuperate all the other credentials as well. But it kind of depends on this anchor credential that one is really secure. So it's both a vulnerability, but it also means that it's surmountable. I think it is possible to solve. But the other thing that occurred to me as you were talking, Andy, is there is a lot of technologies out there, for internet, for cybersecurity and so forth, in terms of monitoring the behavior and the usage of a wallet. I mean, all sorts of banking transactions and card transactions is being monitored all the time to identify indications of fraud, right? What I'm kind of missing from the discussions around the wallets is how can we use some of the same kind of technologies to monitor, not for personal data, not monitoring the people behind it, but just monitoring the integrity of the system, that there are that there's nothing that's as not expected to anomalies, basically. Monitoring the integrity.
Yeah, I think the new technology of digital credentials brings some really good opportunities there, because the breakthrough, if you like, the big advance is that I can now give you some data and you can take that data and present it to someone else. And whoever you present it with can verify it came from Andy, it's not being changed en route, the integrity of the data is still there. And that's a really nice breakthrough with some standardization that's there, but a lot of innovation happening, and that opens up a whole bunch of new opportunities that didn't exist before. So now we know we can give people data that can be transmitted; they can carry it to other places. The person becomes the API almost. You don't need to knit all these systems together, and you can ensure you've got that integrity of data without, hopefully, if it's done properly, leaking loads of privacy information all over the place. So that feels really good, but it then brings into context some things like how do you know the issuer is the valid issuer of data, and how do you know you should share with that relying party they're not a scammer? And it sort of nests down, doesn't it, Marie? You get umpteen layers of this rather large onion.
And that they all need to agree on which onion to use and what it actually means.
And to use a potato.
Yes, exactly. So it's a kind of new form of ecosystem. I see.
Yeah, let's get back to this sort of thought of an ecosystem, because many of the topics that you have been sort of touching on could well be sort of managed within a semi-closed ecosystem. But on the other hand, of course, there will be other factors influencing how closed will the wallet ecosystems be. But moving on a bit, so how will wallets compete with existing solutions? What would make wallets successful? Any thoughts? What are the sort of characteristics of a successful identity payments wallet, looking a couple of years down the road?
So I think some of the XPays, the Apple, the Samsung, and the Google Pay has shown us what it means in terms of having a fantastic user experience. And I think that's the key to make the wallets successful. Part of that is the user experience. The other part is adoption as well. It needs to be useful. I need to be able to use it in everywhere I want to use it. So it's about building an ecosystem around wallets.
So it's about some kind of critical mass question in a way, critical mass of users, use cases, merchants and relying parties accepting the wallet.
Yeah, I think there's I made a note beforehand of three things I think that might get you that critical mass. I think you need a catalyst for a change of behavior amongst the general public. And we saw this with COVID, didn't we, where suddenly everyone shifted to scanning QR codes for COVID passes, and in restaurants for the menu, and that sort of sudden forced shift to no touch interactions and QR codes introduced this new ceremony and this new change of behavior for people that people got really quickly. They go, okay, I've got my phone, download my pass. Oh, I now scan a thing, beep, and away you go. And I think it's similar to that sort of ceremony that we've seen with NFC payments as well. And really credit to the work, the hard work that the teams at Visa and MasterCard and all the banks have done to just make it so you can walk along and go bip and the thing works. And that results in a ceremony and people realize it's more, much more convenient to them and they've got the phone anyway, etc. So I think this catalyst for a change of behavior is really key. And I suspect in this world of wallets and identity and payments, probably the big catalyst coming along is the rise of AI and the explosion of fake everything. I think that's going to be a real interesting one that wallets can help with. The second thing is business incentives. Digital credentials shared by wallets will result in huge improvements in business processes and reduction in costs and the enablement of things that you just couldn't do before because it was too difficult or awkward or regulatory things that stopped you doing it. So you're going to have the business incentives there. And then lastly, you need legislation. You need people to feel confident that they can trust their wallet. Their information is not going to get misused. They know that someone's got their back. You need something along those lines. And we're seeing that with the IDAS legislation that's coming out in Europe at the moment that really is leading the way in this direction for helping to establish for people this level of trust that, yes, it's okay. This thing, I can see it's got some rules around, how we know it's genuine and how I know that that shop is actually the real shop that I'm sharing some information with and not a scammer. That kind of stuff is going to be really, really important if the user interface is done really well to increase confidence amongst people as well. So the catalyst for change, the business incentives and the legislation are the three key things, I think.
So as long as you work within the sort of wallet ecosystem, you could be quite confident that the merchants are real. They're not scammers, because if they were scammers, they would be quite quickly kicked out of the ecosystem. But these sort of moments of truth in the consumer journey, digital journey, I think 2 points come to mind. One is the sort of onboarding into services. It's especially higher value services. The sort of onboarding process is cumbersome. In the Nordics, we are a bit spoiled with using the EIDs for onboarding, which makes it sort of much easier. But outside of Nordic services, then you need to go through the document-based identity proofing processes, registry lookups, and all the related stuff. And that is a burdensome experience for consumer to do this sort of not once or twice, but sort of 10th or 20th or 50th time. If you have to onboard every service separately. So reusable onboarding, I think, would be a sort of catalyst for change. And the other part, of course, is the sort of checkout process, checkout and payment authorization. And there again, improvements have been made, but there's still room to improve. And somehow there is a disconnect in when you check out from a online merchant, you sort of jump and switch context easily a couple times in order to get the payment authorized, and then you sort of redirect it back to the merchant website and so on and so forth. So there's probably much could be improved in a sort of more seamless wallet payment experience.
Yeah. I think the reuse of credentials is another big leap forward we're going to have here, which is, everyone's pretty fed up of, scan your face, go find your document somewhere, take a picture of it, try and get it so it's not going to
try to get it work, everything. And
you do that, and then you've got to go then do it again. And I recently downsized from my house into a flat, and to try and prove my identity about 80 million times to go through that process with everyone. The answer is a wallet with a reusable identity credential in it that lets you do that, and you verify it once and you use it many times. I mean, that obviously is a really big opportunity for us.
Yeah, I think then we're back to your catalyst of change, Andy, as well. I think that was a great way of looking at it. I mean, we do see activities by the governments that is encouraging the adoption of EIDs. I recently got some anecdotes from France, where you saw a doubling of one of the identity schemes in the terms of the take-up, because the French government required the citizens to register for one of the France Connect identity schemes, and in order to get subsidies for education. Very small niche use case, but it did, add millions to that particular identity scheme.
And we're going to see that. You got the carrot and the stick, haven't you? And we're going to have the stick in the form of, in Europe, the IDAS legislation, which says that certain organisations will have to accept an IDAS wallet for strong customer authentication, which is right in your sweet spot of interest there, isn't it, Marie? Yeah,
there's still big questions, I think, and discussions in the industry of how fast will that come? Does it also include payment? What's the difference between user authentication and customer authentication? So, but we are expecting, more clarity. I think as the time is going and there's more time to work through what this actually means, especially in terms of large-scale pilots as well. But it's a big industry to change. It's an existing ecosystem. So, of course, there are lots of concerns and lots of arms up in the air. But it's a journey, I think.
But there are multiple sort of large change drivers. In addition to the regulation, I think the technical development on sort of decentralized systems, decentralized identity, self-sovereign identity, even going into the sort of decentralized money, crypto money type of developments. How do you see those? Where will the balance end up regarding decentralization and centralized systems?
We've, as Evelyn, we had many POC projects as self-sovereign identity became a thing and digital credentials became a thing, and interest in it increased. And everyone wants to know, well, what is it and how does it work? And I've lost count of the number of POCs we did, everything from identity for cars, identity for organizations, national identity schemes, identity for staff. And you could see this huge level of interest. However, only a smallish fraction of those POCs have moved into production. So we need to look at why that is. And the ones that have clear business value behind them. So we're not talking about specifically government-sponsored schemes, but the private sector ones, or the ones with organizations that they are able to show a very clear value in terms of it will save us X million, it will gain us Y, etc. So you've got this you need to reach exit velocity out of a POC. That exit velocity isn't dependent on whether it's centralized or decentralized. It's dependent on the business value, the organizational value you get from it. Now, the jump that you get with the decentralized world is this new capability for people to carry the data rather than, organizations having to knit all their systems together at huge cost to some system integrator. Instead of that, you just give the person the data and they move the data around for you. And once you get your head around that, it opens up a whole bunch of new possibilities. So that's the new thing. And the question is, how do you utilize that to give you value? So that's where the centralized versus decentralized bit comes in, I think. The decentralization you could define in many ways, but giving the person the data, giving the person the keys is one of possibly the best ways to define it.
I find this discussion interesting because usually it comes from the very well-founded sort of ideological thought that people should control their own data, sort of personal data, my data. But then on the other hand, I do sort of think that many of the sort of economics of the ecosystem drive towards centralization, because free services always trumps privacy. I think that's one of the sort of things we have learned on the sort of internet services. So consumers or users do not want to have direct costs related to services. They would much rather pay with information, and the information then needs to be monetized, and that of course drives centralized systems. So there's a strong sort of commercial logic towards centralization and monetization of information related to the transactions. Well, what do you think, Marie?
Yeah, no, I agree, Anna. I think the decentralized identity, verifiable credentials, the ability to take your credential, get it, and share it, get it verified with an authentic source. Great idea. I really like the concept, and but it will turn upside down the current ecosystems, and let alone current infrastructure and current operational processes and the way things work today. It's incredibly hard to change the world. We might all try to change the world in our corners, but I think it's hard. I more think we will see an evolution where the best bits of kind of decentralization with that makes sense, because it gives much richer use cases. You can combine pieces of information in a different way. You can trust them maybe more easily as well than if you have a very centralized approach. I think we'll see it in selected niches and selected use cases, pockets. But again, they all need to agree that this is an onion and not a potato. I mean, again, there needs to be common standards and agreed ways of exchanging the keys and verifying the data. So I'm schizophrenic. I'm in two minds on this one.
Yeah, I think the right solution would be a kind of hybrid that comes out. And if you think of centralized systems at one end of the spectrum and completely decentralized at the other, the answer is going to sit somewhere in the middle. So if we look at IDaaS, for example, there are degrees of decentralization in there. Give people a wallet, give them their credentials, give them control of their keys. But there's also degrees of centralization. So there's some legislation coming from the European Commission, and member states will be centralizing how things work in their individual countries. And there will be trust lists which list who's allowed to issue what credential, and they need to be run by someone as well, and somebody needs to set the rules. So there's a lot of kind of thinking about let's call it technical decentralization, like different protocols and standards, and then you've got governance decentralization. And governance is a lot harder to decentralize than the technology side of things. But I suppose if you could decentralize it across 27 member states, which is part of the implications of the IDaaS legislation, there's a lot of implementation will be at the
national level,
will be decided by the member states. That could give you a degree of decentralization, but also it can bring a degree of chaos, can't it? Because you end up with 27 different approaches, different UIs, and everyone gets really confused. So yeah, some kind of hybrid, I think, is the answer.
Let's look deeper into the competition, into what to sort of expect from the future. What kind of wallets do you foresee coming into the market? We've discussed the sort of EU identity wallets for sure. Looks like a highly serious initiative from the EU and the member states. So that looks quite likely, though, of course, we have some background on the eIDAS 1.0 and then the sort of promises which were not kept on that. But what other types of wallets? What kind of niches or sort of, if we, as a second given, we take the sort of Google and Apple wallets, the sort of global player wallets, but what other types do you foresee coming into the market?
Do you want to go first, Marie?
Yeah, I do see. I mean, wallets are such a convenient way for the consumer to be in charge and to share. I mean, as we talked about earlier, but they do need acceptance. But I do think wallets are very much here to stay, and they're here to proliferate for many more different use cases as well. We do see an emergence of wallets for merchants, where you can add not just your payment credential, but also your loyalty card, and have a better interaction beyond not just an app, but where you might also be able to combine it with certain concession rights and so forth. I think public transport is another really interesting use case where you need to combine typically payment and identity credentials, meaning rights for concessions. So it does open, it opens up for new use cases where you need to interact with the consumers in a way that is more enriched and where you can bring the ecosystem together. But it still has the individual, the person in center. What I'm quite excited to see is more around organizational business identity. It's going to be in a wallet in the same way. I'm not sure. It needs to have the link to a person that can interact with it. But it can give a new way for companies to confirm who they are in front of other companies, to interact at a different level. And I think that's just a few examples of the kind of wallets we may be able to see.
And just checking, but essentially you started with this sort of merchant retailer B2C sort of loyalty program type of wallets, which I think is quite an obvious point. And then sort of very similar to that would be airline loyalty program, travel wallet type of things. And there's a lot of activity on the travel side for frictionless travel that you could build into a wallet functionality.
Yeah.
Potentially have your passport credentials someday in the wallet itself. And then, of course, the ecosystem around traveling, the hotels, the rental cars, and everything.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think we're entering what we call it the wallet wars here. I think the question is whether there's going to be one wallet to rule them all, or there will be many wallets for specific contexts. And what I'm seeing in the market at the moment is everyone wants their own wallet. Because it's a bit like everyone wanting their own web browser back when that all started up, or their own walled garden internet like CompuServe and all the ones the mobile operators tried to launch. And
only few will be successful.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at, we've learned a lot of things from those experiences. So we've now got the Open Wallet Foundation that's been launched, and Jen and Visa are both founding members of that, which is looking at exactly these things. How can you create an infrastructure that is open and shareable and not proprietary and closed? Now, clearly, Google and Apple have got, and Samsung, I guess, as well, have got a very strong hand with the advantage of being the mobile operating system provider. And Apple particularly is very well known for being very closed and proprietary. And some of the legislation in IDAS is really written to prevent that kind of walled garden approach being set up. So I think that's good. Would Apple comply? What will Apple do is always a good question. And I've got a good inkling what they're up to. I think that we're going to see a proliferation of wallets for different contexts, and employee identity is going to be a key one. We had a really good project with a National Health Service here in the UK on digital staff passports to allow staff to move across different hospitals, be immediately recognised as being a doctor in 10 seconds rather than 10 days of checking paperwork, that kind of thing. So they'll have their own use cases. I think it's going to be a bit weird for a little while, because I might feel a bit uncomfortable if I've got my airline travel app with some airline credentials. Do I want to put my employee information and my medical credentials in there? No, not really. And similarly, if I got a bank app with a wallet in, do I want to put my gym membership in there? That's going to be a bit odd. So I think there's going to be some emergence of a generic do everything wallet, and the one that is most beautiful and has greatest acceptance is going to work. And I think we also need to think of, as Marie said, organizational wallets. So wallets for companies, because companies can't prove who they are to each other either. So that's happening. And we have in the large-scale pilot consortium that we're in, the EWC one, we have a whole work stream on organizational identity, which is going to be hugely interesting, and massive benefits can come to organizations there. And the other one is wallets for things. So cars will be able to prove to me, like, okay, I'm owned by Marie, and I've got this many miles, or I can go and charge up at this charging point, or I'm property taxed, etc. So
I have this payment instrument attached to my car, and
yeah, exactly. So wallets for people, organizations, and things. This is why I'm in this space. It's really exciting to see what's going to happen.
Yeah. I think the lines between an app and a wallet they'll be more and more blurred in a way. But I think a key difference is acceptance. Is it accepted beyond the the issuer of the app, basically, or the merchant that developed the app?
And that
is actually so well, right?
Vitality of the ecosystem.
Yeah, you have the acceptance mark, don't you? With what seems to the general public a really simple thing, which is Visa sticker on a window or a little icon, button, whatever. That single thing tells people, oh, I can use it here with confidence because there's this people don't realize the massive infrastructure behind it to make that single thing work, do they?
Yeah, and it gives a lot of sort of benefits. I think two main ones. One, for the user, it's a sort of user experience that you understand and know beforehand with the brand being visible. And the second one is, of course, the sort of inherent security that there are some decent processes behind if you need to do a chargeback or something else goes wrong.
Yeah. And there is going to be like a digital trust mark kind of thing for Europe, I believe, isn't there?
Yeah.
Haven't seen many details of it yet, but I think it is mooted. Some kind of icon or logo or something like that, which should be really interesting to see how that evolves.
Mm.
Yeah.
But it has to be underpinned with the operational processes to assure trust, to know that here it works and it works the way it's intended, and the consequences are given and clear for everybody. I mean, like we know from payment schemes, as the example.
Yeah, but hey, let's dive a bit deeper. We sort of in the beginning briefly touched on what type of role do you see Andy Jen playing in the wallet space, but do you want to elaborate on that? What are your sort of thoughts and plans, and what is your call to action for anybody?
Sure, so obviously we'll have some public plans and some very secret plans. So I'll tell you about.
Well, tell the secret ones. I think the public.
Oh, there'll be more. Okay, yeah, I'll tell you the secret ones. Why not? So I think with Jen, with the history we have with Avast and Norton, where we've given people the ability to protect their things, like antivirus, protecting your computer and so on, and we're moving very quickly into not just protecting your things online, but protecting you online. And we think there's a real gap there in the tools for people to survive in the digital world. And one of the biggest problems is around trust. So our focus is, let's make sure we give people the tools to survive in this digital world, and a world that's rapidly changing, especially with AI coming along. Everyone's very excited about AI and the ability to use ChatGPT to write all your script for webinars like this, for example, or do very nice pictures for backgrounds and so on.
So to see that you noticed.
Yeah. So everyone's very excited about that, but they're not really focused on the very rapidly rising ability to fake pretty much everything. So people will need trust in this way online, and what Jen does, and the sub brands beneath it, like Avast and Norton LifeLock, is provide those tools. So that's what we're working on. We have 500 million users of our stuff around the world, and they all need these tools as well. So that's what we're looking at. It's no secret we're looking at, can we provide everyone with a wallet that is able to hold any sort of credentials and do signing and authentication, as well as just credential verification. So that kind of direction, everything's moving very swiftly down that route. But we're not alone in that as well. But we think our cybersecurity background is going to be really helpful there.
Could well imagine. How about Marie? What are the thoughts for Visa beyond the sort of being obviously the choice of payments?
Well, that's true. We are focused on being the best way of paying and being paid. And of course, wallets then represent a new area where consumer choice, privacy, security, and convenience is still going to be essential, right? So this trust network that we run, I see that to be, at one hand, extendable within digital identity. On the other hand, I see that identity can really add security and trust to payment services. So we are looking at ways we can embed in a meaningful way that gives more flexibility, but also convenience, embedding identity services within payments. So we have a lot of work now, both on innovation as well as understanding how to make the best use of wallets like the IDAS pilot, the Open Wallet Foundation, and more. So
now you're essentially built the networks through which you can influence the outcomes and develop your own capabilities. Is that the right takeaway? That sounds like a bit we want to take over the world. I don't think that's entirely what you want. But... You've done that already, so.
It's a really good analogy though, because I use Visa as an example a lot in describing how you can set up trust rules and policies to make something work on a global scale. And you need that for this new world as well. So, I think Visa has got a fantastic role to play to say, well, here's how you can do this. And IDaaS is just scratching the surface, isn't it, with what you're going to need, I think, Marie, for this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's true. We're certainly here to help and to make sure that it is secure and convenient for consumers and merchants and issuers.
Yeah. Within Signicat, I think we see our role as enabling these things to come about. So, of course, extending on the existing KYC, KYB solutions that we have, automating onboarding. We have Signicat mobile ID technology being used in the banks and payment service provider, payment apps on a wide scale, and then it could well be used and is sort of used in bank ID type of apps that you could call them wallets already today for authentication, for the app security. And then, of course, digital signature capabilities, and then the sort of brokering and of attributes, verifiable credentials, tokens. I think there are probably quite a number of roles. So we see wallets in that sense as a considerable growth area. But hey, we are getting quite a number of questions from the audience. It would be really nice to jump into those. Thank you for that. And then there's still time for a few more questions if you so wish, and we'll try to pick up some of the more interesting ones. I apologize, we won't answer all of them.
We should do that last one first, Janne, from Mihail's Galushka, I think it is.
Everybody discusses how much wallets could improve our life. Is there any progress in understanding who is going to pay the bill for having and running wallets? Well, we come into the sort of monetization question. Wallet issuers, how will they make a living if the users of the wallet will not pay direct costs? Any thoughts, Andrew, Marie?
Well, yeah, I'm really interested in this. We have a work stream in our IDaaS large-scale pilot consortium on the economics of the ecosystem, right? So there's a lot of focus on the technology right now, on the legislation. But there's two things people aren't talking about. One is the user interface, and the other is the economics of the whole thing and who pays for what. It's an area that needs a lot more focus than it's getting. So we'll be covering that in our large-scale pilot consortium anyway. There's a general feeling that wallets are free to individuals, right? So if people aren't going to pay for wallets, and I wouldn't pay for a wallet either. So where is the money? And
are you comfortable paying with your information so that you essentially allow the wallet to monetize your information?
Yeah, I think the value is embedded in the effort that's gone into the creation of the credential in the first place that's then shared, right? So a credential issued by the government, we're used to kind of paying to get a passport and paying to get a driving license. So maybe every time I get a physical one of those and I pay for that, they can just give me a digital one. So that might work. But then in the private sector, there's organizations that spend an awful lot of effort to create something for you, like an IDaaS, high identity assurance verification. It's not cheap to do. So the benefit is a lot of it is going to the relying parties, the recipients of the data, who can smooth and improve their business process and reduce their fraud and get more customers. So there's probably a sort of relying party or verifier pays model. And the thing we need to be really careful about here is how payment like that might work, because you could have all the privacy around sharing the credential, but if I don't know, some retailer I go to then pays the issuer of the credential, that issuer knows, oh, Andy's been to this retailer. So you've got to be really careful about how these payment ecosystems work and make sure they don't breach the privacy that's being very carefully constructed around the way credentials are shared. So it's a really good question. I don't think we know the answer yet. I would love to have seen something in the legislation other than wallets are free to consumers. And I guess it's the role of the large-scale pilots to figure this one out. So we're going to have fun, aren't we, Marie, doing that?
I think we're going to be, I can't think it's going to be a lot of work. I'm I'm also again thinking about this becoming the EU ID world becoming a evolution of the current status and not an immediate revolution, at least. I mean, over time, when we look back 5 and 10 years, we'll see the dramatic change, but it'll take time to get there. So I think that the existing infrastructure, existing business models is something that, at least for the near term, will continue to influence wallets as well when they come in. So there are existing, business models around payment, clearly. They are the same around existing identity schemes as well. The relying party is paying for the benefits, typically, sometimes even the consumer, although I hope that won't continue. So I think we will see a gradual evolution, but I completely agree with you, Andy. There's more work, and I think there will be a number of new use cases as well that will bring value to the relying parties, whether that's around security or convenience or just new services you couldn't do without a wallet. So,
but my take on it would be that, 10 plus years ago, when running a sort of national EID scheme, the equation for profitability was quite simple. You needed more users, you needed more use cases, relying parties, and then you needed more transaction frequency. And essentially, because you charged per transaction for a authentication, and then if you have enough of these transactions, you start making a profit. Every new user is an investment in the beginning because you have to do the identity proofing, which is not cheap, like Andy said. But then when they reuse that multiple times, you start to earn a profit on it.
Yeah, that's right.
And in the wallet context, I would see the high value sort of reusable use cases being use cases like reusable onboarding with full attribute sets, much more than the EID schemes, for example, provide, which is typically just first name, last name, and date of birth, national identifier type of thing. But you could have a full customer profile when you onboard to a service provider. And then, of course, on the other end is the payment capability. And you might earn quite a bit out of the payments if you have a really slick and smooth payment experience.
Yeah, I think there's another model as well, Janne, which is that the wallet is free and the issuing and verifying is all free because it comes as part of a $1,200 shiny device that is what you pay for. And when that device is locked into an ecosystem that encourages you to buy other devices from the same company because it works seamlessly and beautiful all the way across, then you've got a very, very different business model. It's not focused on the wallet and the payment, for using the wallet. It's focused on selling you more of another product that is kind of interlinked and dependent. Yeah. I guess, the sort of...
And the worst case is that you get charged for both. The merchants pay for the transactions and you pay for the device.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But I think the other key point is the ecosystem that allows you to have a business model. So it is the adoption, all these other tools and devices you have. It's all the app developers that's developing the apps that need the kind of information you're relying on. I'm also thinking, I remember another discussion we were having, Janne, on if you have a wallet that can bring trusted consumers to merchants, to restaurants, to places you may want to buy things, you have quite an important power as well in directing the payments and directing the purchase experience and the decisions even for where to buy what or which restaurant to go to, which restaurant to order from, and so forth, right?
Yeah. So if the customers come through the wallet to the merchant,
exactly,
the power of the wallet issuer, of course, increases immensely, and you can charge the merchant much more than just the payment transaction itself.
And I think that's a transfer
of the marketing and all the digital infrastructure needed, bringing these accessible customers to you. Let's pick another question and just sort of finish up on the questions from audience. There is a question regarding how the new European Digital Wallet Initiative will impact the current identity architecture of pan-Europe geography. Will it impact it? Are EU identity wallets, are they just another form of identity providers, or is there something more to it?
Who wants that one first?
I think it's completely different. It is a revolution in the weighting, the way it's being set up with trusted service providers issuing credentials, information, and relying parties being able to access those. So it's completely different, I think, than existing identity schemes because of the decentralized nature inherently.
Yeah, I think the big jump forward is there were quite a lot of arguments when and discussions, debates, if you like, when IDAS 2 was first being kind of conjured up and created, about how open the wallet should be, and whether it should be able to hold other credentials that, you know, just from anyone who wants to put a credential in it. And I'm really pleased to see that it is now being structured as a wallet that could be for any purpose, for any use case, for any credential. And that's the answer, right? If it's restricted to just a government use case or government verifiers with a single credential, you know, it's never going to work. So here you've got a huge canvas for innovation, because companies could start using this wallet straight away. Private sector organizations can create new use cases, and organizations like your own, you know, will come up with really simple ways for people to issue and verify credentials, I'm sure. So it's really good to see it emerge as an open wallet capability. And there was another kind of really key decision, which was, there's this thing called a PID, which you'll hear a lot about, personal identity data credential. It's the official government issued ID credential for you that's backed by regulation, and it has legal standing, right? And there was discussion that the wallet couldn't be used until it had a PID in it. And I was like, no, don't, whatever you do, don't do that. Please ensure you can use the wallet without having to have a PID, because it's going to be quite hard to, you know, there'll be hoops to jump through to get a PID. So I'm really, really pleased again to see that you can use the wallet without having a PID. And that's brilliant, because you've got these, you know, government certified approved wallets with legislation behind them that you can now use for anything. And that's going to just trigger a huge wave of innovation, I think.
Okay. Hey, thank you very much. I think it's time to conclude the webinar. I would first, of course, like to thank very much Andy and Marie. Highly insightful thoughts. Great discussion. Not much of a debate, I'm afraid. I don't think we sort of agreed on everything, but we didn't sort of materially disagree on many things either. Thank you very much. Also, thank you very much for the audience for listening in and posting good questions. There was quite a number of questions that we didn't cover here. We will do some work and try to get them covered afterwards. So please come back if you have interest to see our thoughts on those. I would also like to very much thank, of course, Aquile. She has been helping us very much on organizing this webinar altogether, putting everything together, and essentially being the director of the sort of webinar, so that we see the right speaker in the screen at the time. We are planning to sort of distribute the webinar link if you want to share it with your colleagues or somebody else. And also looking forward to meeting you and continuing the discussion in different forums. Andy and Marie especially, but also myself, we are quite frequently visiting different types of events. For me, I think the next bigger event will be Money 2020 in Amsterdam, early June. There's a QR code here. You get my availability at the Money 2020 if you're interested in booking a meeting there for sort of one-on-one discussion. Otherwise, just walk by, come to the stand number H58, and then you will find myself and then other Signicat experts at that stand. So with these words, I would wish everybody goodbye, and then have a very, very good day going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.